Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm so happy to have you here today. I hope you're all doing great and feeling excited because today we're diving into something truly important: how to speak English fluently and confidently, and improve your English listening and speaking skills. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever felt like you wanted to speak English better, but didn't quite know where to start? Or maybe you felt frustrated because you know the words, but they don't come out the way you want them to when you speak? Well, you're not alone, and today's video is exactly for you. If you're someone who wants to speak English fluently, whether it's for school, work, travel, or just to connect with more people around the world, then I promise this video will give you the tips, techniques, and mindset to get there. But before we jump into the hows, let's talk about why fluency in English is so important. English is more than just a language. It's a key to open doors to many opportunities. Whether it's a job opportunity, a chance to make new friends, or just the ability to travel the world and communicate with people from all walks of life, fluency in English can help you achieve all of that. But here's the thing. Fluency doesn't happen overnight. It's not something that's magically unlocked just because you know a few words or phrases. Fluency is a journey. And just like any other skill you want to master, whether it's playing an instrument, learning to dance, or even cooking, the secret is consistent practice and the right mindset. So, if you're ready to take that first step towards speaking English confidently and fluently, then let's dive in together. Now, I want you to keep an open mind because we're going to break down everything you need to know, from simple techniques to mindset shifts that will help you improve your fluency. And trust me, it's all possible with some patience and practice. So grab your notebook, get comfortable, and let's get started. Part 2: Personal Story and Inspiration. I want to take a moment to share a personal story with you. This is something I rarely talk about, but I believe it's important for you to understand that even though fluency may feel far away right now, it is absolutely achievable. And I know that from my own experience. When I was younger, I was just like many of you. I was a student with big dreams, but I also had a huge challenge ahead of me. I wanted to speak English fluently, but I didn't know where to start. I didn't have all the fancy resources or teachers to guide me. All I had was a deep desire to be able to communicate in English without feeling shy, without hesitating, and without constantly translating in my head. But let me tell you, it was not easy at all. I remember sitting in the classroom listening to my teacher speak and thinking to myself, how do they do it so effortlessly? How do they speak without stopping, without worrying about mistakes. And then I would try to say something, but the words didn't come out right. I'd mix up tenses, forget words, and sometimes even say the wrong thing entirely. And the worst part, I felt embarrassed. I felt like everyone was watching me, waiting for me to mess up. The fear of making mistakes held me back for a long time. One day, though, something changed. I'll never forget the moment when my teacher, a woman I truly respected, looked at me and said, "You can be fluent if you practice every day." Fluency comes with consistency, not perfection. Those words hit me hard. I had always thought that fluency was about getting everything right. But my teacher showed me something different. Fluency wasn't about being perfect. It was about being brave enough to make mistakes and keeping going day after day. This realization changed my life. It was like a switch flipped in my mind. I realized that fluency wasn't an impossible goal, but a journey. It was a process of taking small steps every single day. Each time I spoke, even if I made a mistake, I was moving closer to my goal. And that is how I began my journey to fluency. At first, it was difficult. I started practicing English every day, but it wasn't always smooth. I would read books out loud, listen to songs in English, and try to watch movies without subtitles, even though I didn't understand half of what was being said. But the more I did it, the better I got. Slowly, my vocabulary grew, my confidence grew, and I began to speak with less fear. I remember a turning point. I was sitting in class one day, and for the first time, I didn't hesitate before answering a question. The words just came out. I wasn't translating from my native language in my head anymore. It was as if I was thinking in English, not just speaking it. That feeling was incredible. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But it wasn't just about speaking. I started paying more attention to how I was listening to English too. I remember when I started listening to English podcasts and stories, even when I didn't fully understand them. At first, it was frustrating because I couldn't catch everything. But over time, I started picking up more and more. And this made a huge difference in how I spoke. Listening to others, whether it was a podcast, a song, or even just a conversation, helped me get used to the rhythm of the language. It helped me improve my pronunciation and my understanding of how native speakers use the language in everyday situations. Another thing that really helped me was practicing with others. I didn't have to wait for a perfect moment or for my English to be flawless. I simply started having conversations no matter how small, with my classmates or even with myself. And do you know what I learned? People are not waiting for you to make mistakes. They want to understand you. And when they see that you're trying, really trying, they'll be supportive and encouraging. They won't judge you for your mistakes. They'll help you improve. That was a huge realization for me. Looking back, I realized that all those mistakes, those awkward moments, and those days where I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere, all of them were necessary. They weren't failures. They were stepping stones to success. Every mistake I made taught me something new. Every word I stumbled over was a lesson, a small victory. And when I finally felt fluent, when I was able to speak without thinking too much about what I was going to say next, I realized that all of that effort had paid off. Fluency isn't about being perfect. It's about the willingness to take that first step, then the second, and the third. It's about consistency, practice, and embracing the process. The truth is, the more you practice, the better you become, but it takes time, patience, and the belief that you're capable of doing it. And that's why I'm here today, sharing this story with you. I know exactly how it feels to struggle with fluency, but I also know that if you stick with it, if you commit to practicing every single day, you can achieve it too. If I could do it, so can you. So remember, fluency is not an overnight thing. It's like planting a seed. At first, you may not see anything happening, but with daily care, watering it, giving it sunlight, nurturing it, eventually it will grow. Your fluency will grow. I hope this story helps you realize that you're not alone on this journey. Everyone starts somewhere, and everyone can succeed if they are willing to keep going. Part 3. Understanding fluency as a process. Now that I've shared my story, I want to take a deeper look at something that I believe is absolutely crucial to understanding how we become fluent in English. And that is the idea that fluency is a process. This is a concept that changed everything for me when I finally understood it. And it will change the way you think about learning English too. When we think about fluency, many of us imagine a perfect, smooth conversation where everything we say flows easily, and we understand everything the other person says without hesitation. And while that's the end goal, we must first understand that fluency isn't something that happens overnight. It's not like a magic switch that you can flip. Fluency takes time, effort, and most importantly, practice. I used to think that fluency was something that came all at once, like reaching a destination after a long journey. But the more I learned and grew in my own language abilities, I realized that fluency is more like a journey in itself. It's a continuous process. You don't reach fluency in one giant leap. Instead, you take it one step at a time, with each step building on the one before it. Let me explain this with a simple analogy that I think will help make this idea clearer. Think about growing a plant. At first, you plant a seed in the soil. You water it, give it sunlight, and make sure it gets the care it needs. But at the beginning, you don't see much happening. There's no plant yet. It's just a tiny seed. Does this mean your efforts are useless? Absolutely not. In fact, your efforts are vital. The seed is slowly growing underground, where you can't see it. With time, it starts to sprout, and before long, a little green shoot pokes up from the soil. As you continue to nurture it, it grows taller and stronger, until one day it becomes a full, healthy plant. This is exactly how fluency works. In the early stages, you might feel like you're not making much progress. You might make mistakes, forget words, or struggle to understand others. But each of these small steps is important. Just like the plant, you are growing beneath the surface. You may not always see your progress immediately, but it's happening, step by step. Each word you learn, each sentence you speak, each story you listen to is like adding water and sunlight to that plant. And slowly, your fluency begins to grow. Fluency is also about building confidence over time. It doesn't come from reading a grammar book or memorizing vocabulary for hours. It comes from actively using the language, from speaking, listening, thinking, and reflecting on your learning experience. And the more you practice, the more you begin to trust yourself. You'll find that one day, just like I did, you can start having conversations without constantly thinking about every word. You'll be able to express yourself naturally, and that's when you'll see just how far you've come. One of the key things to remember here is that fluency isn't just about speaking fast or being able to answer every question immediately. It's about speaking clearly and being able to express your ideas effectively. I often tell my students that fluency is about making yourself understood, not about rushing through sentences. I remember when I was learning English, I had a friend who spoke extremely fast. He could rattle off entire paragraphs in one go, and he sounded so confident. But when I asked him to slow down so I could catch what he was saying, I realized that I couldn't understand most of what he said because he was speaking so quickly. He was fluent in a sense, but the speed was getting in the way of communication. That experience taught me an important lesson. Fluency doesn't mean speed. It means clarity. It's about getting your message across, not how quickly you say it. When I started focusing on speaking clearly, taking a moment to think before I spoke, organizing my thoughts, my fluency improved. I could express myself more effectively, and others understood me better. Now, let's talk a little about how fluency is developed in different areas. It's not just about speaking. Fluency is about listening, reading, and writing as well. For example, if you want to be fluent in English, you need to develop your listening skills too. Many learners focus so much on speaking that they forget how important listening is. But you can't truly speak fluently if you don't understand the language when others speak to you. Listening helps you develop an ear for the language, its rhythm, its sounds, and even its slang. I remember when I was learning English, I listened to a lot of podcasts and songs. I would pay attention to how words were pronounced, how native speakers connected words, and how they used expressions in different situations. Little by little, my understanding of the language grew, and that made speaking much easier. It's also important to understand that mistakes are part of the process. There is no shortcut to fluency. There are no quick fixes. You will make mistakes, and that's okay. Mistakes are your teachers, and they're one of the most valuable parts of the learning journey. Every time you make a mistake, you learn something new. It helps you understand where you need to improve, and it gives you the opportunity to adjust and grow. And just like a plant needs regular care to grow, fluency requires consistent practice. It doesn't matter if you're practicing for 5 minutes or 5 hours. The key is consistency. The more you expose yourself to the language and use it in real-world situations, the more natural it will become for you. Think of it like building a habit. The more you practice, the more fluent you will become. Another aspect to keep in mind is that fluency is not about being perfect. It's about being comfortable with imperfection. There will always be new words to learn, new expressions to master, and new things to understand. But that's what makes the journey exciting. Fluency is about being okay with the fact that you will never know it all. It's about continuing to learn, to grow, and to enjoy the process. In summary, fluency is a continuous journey. It's not a destination you reach, but a process you go through, one step at a time. You will face challenges along the way, but remember that each challenge is an opportunity to learn and grow. Fluency isn't about perfection, it's about progress. It's about using the language in real life, making mistakes, and learning from them. So, the next time you feel like you're not making progress, remember this. Fluency is like growing a plant. It takes time, patience, and a little care every day. But if you keep at it, one day you'll look back and realize how far you've come. Part 4. Overcoming Common Struggles. Let's face it, learning a new language is never a smooth ride. It's like any other skill you try to master. There are moments when you feel on top of the world, and then there are times when you feel like you're stuck, or worse, like you're going backwards. I've been there. I know exactly how it feels to try so hard and not see immediate results. I also know how it feels when you make mistakes, feel embarrassed, and wonder if all your efforts are in vain. But here's the truth. Struggles are part of the process, and it's completely normal to face challenges along the way. So today, I want to talk about some of the common struggles that many of us face on the road to fluency and how to overcome them. Trust me, you're not alone, and more importantly, these struggles can be beaten. Fear of making mistakes. One of the biggest obstacles I see, and one I struggled with myself, is the fear of making mistakes. Let's be honest, when you're learning a new language, it's easy to get caught up in worrying about how you sound or if people will laugh at you. You're afraid of saying the wrong thing, mispronouncing words, or making grammar mistakes. I get it. I've been there too. I remember when I was first speaking English, I was terrified to make mistakes. It was like every time I opened my mouth, I was waiting for someone to correct me, and that made me hesitate. But here's what I learned. Mistakes are not the enemy. Mistakes are your best friends in this journey. They're actually the best way to learn. Imagine you're learning to ride a bike. The first few times you fall, you don't give up, right? You get back on and try again, and eventually you start riding smoothly. Learning a language is no different. Each mistake is a chance to improve. The more mistakes you make, the closer you get to speaking fluently. I always remind my students, don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's better to speak and make a mistake than to not speak at all. And that's the mindset I want you to adopt. So, take a deep breath, speak with confidence, and know that every mistake is just another step toward success. Not understanding native speakers. Another common struggle is not understanding native speakers. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone is speaking too fast or using slang or phrases you've never heard before? It can be overwhelming, and you might feel like you're just standing there trying to catch up, and it's easy to feel discouraged. This is a tough one, but let me tell you something. It's completely normal to not understand everything at first. Native speakers speak quickly, use idioms, and have different accents, so it's natural to miss things, especially at the beginning. When I was learning English, I used to feel frustrated when I couldn't keep up with conversations. I thought I was failing. But what I soon realized is that understanding takes time. You don't need to catch every single word. What matters is that you understand the main message. Here's how I tackled this. I started listening to different types of content, like podcasts, audiobooks, and even movies. At first, I didn't understand everything, but over time, I began picking up more and more. I focused on getting the general meaning, and gradually, I got better at understanding specific details. So, don't get discouraged if you don't understand everything right away. Keep listening, and over time, your brain will start to recognize patterns in the language, making it easier to catch more words and phrases. If you don't understand something, don't be afraid to ask for clarification. It's a great opportunity to learn and practice. Year 3. Struggling to find the right words. Have you ever been in a conversation where you know exactly what you want to say, but the words just won't come out? Or maybe you try to say something, but it sounds awkward or incorrect. This is another common struggle that I hear from a lot of learners. You have the knowledge in your head, but it's not coming out in the right way. When I was learning English, I faced this issue all the time. I knew the vocabulary, but in the heat of the moment, my mind would go blank, and I couldn't remember the right word. I would freeze and feel embarrassed, like I wasn't fluent enough. But here's the thing. It's not about knowing every single word. It's about finding a way to communicate your ideas, even if you don't know the exact word. This is where creativity comes into play. If you can't think of a word, try to explain it using other words. Use gestures, synonyms, or descriptions. The important thing is to keep the conversation going. One technique I used was to practice paraphrasing. That means saying the same thing in a different way. I'd try to find alternative ways to express what I wanted to say. Over time, this made me more fluent because I learned to think on my feet and not rely on just memorized vocabulary. So, if you find yourself struggling to find the right words, don't panic. Use what you know to get your message across. And remember, the more you practice, the easier it will become to recall the right words when you need them. Lack of consistency. The fourth struggle I want to address is lack of consistency. Let me ask you something. How many times have you started practicing English only to stop after a week or two? Maybe life got busy or you lost motivation, and before you knew it, your English practice took a back seat. It happens to all of us. I can't stress this enough. Consistency is key to mastering any language. When I was learning, I realized that it wasn't about practicing for hours in one day. It was about practicing every day, even if it was just for 15 minutes. The small, consistent steps add up. You can't expect to become fluent if you don't make English practice a regular part of your day. What helped me was setting aside time every day, even if it was just a small window, to speak, listen, or read in English. The more I did this, the more natural it became, and I noticed progress quicker than I expected. So, set a daily goal for yourself, even if it's small. It could be learning 5 new words, having a 10-minute conversation, or listening to an English podcast. Consistency is the magic ingredient that will lead you to fluency. Comparing yourself to others. Finally, one of the hardest struggles to overcome is the tendency to compare yourself to others. It's so easy to look at someone who speaks English perfectly and feel discouraged because you're not there yet. But here's the reality. Everyone's language journey is different. You don't know how long that person has been learning, what resources they've had, or what their personal challenges are. What matters is your own journey. When I was learning, I used to compare myself to others and feel like I wasn't progressing fast enough. But what I learned was that comparison is the thief of joy. Instead of focusing on what others are doing, I focused on my own progress, even the small wins. And that's what kept me motivated. You are your own competition. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small. Every step forward is a victory, and you'll get to fluency at your own pace. So, if you're facing any of these struggles right now, don't give up. These challenges are normal, and they're part of the process. Remember, mistakes are not failures. They're lessons. Keep practicing, stay consistent, and be kind to yourself. Every step you take is a step closer to fluency. Part 5. Speaking clearly and not quickly. When we talk about fluency, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that speaking quickly is the ultimate goal. After all, if someone speaks fast, they must be fluent, right? But the truth is, fluency is not about speed. It's about clarity. In this section, we're going to dive deep into why speaking clearly is more important than speaking quickly, and how this can help you become a more confident and effective communicator in English. Let's start by addressing the misconception that speed equals fluency. It's a mistake I see a lot of language learners make. There's a common belief that if you can speak fast without pausing or thinking, you are fluent. But here's the reality. Fluency is not about how fast you speak. It's about how well you express yourself. The goal is to make yourself understood. Think about it this way. If you speak too quickly, the chances of miscommunication increase. Imagine you're speaking to someone who is learning English. If you talk too fast, it can be overwhelming for them to catch everything you're saying. And the same goes for you. If you try to speak too quickly, you may rush over words or make mistakes that you wouldn't have made if you had taken your time. When I was first learning English, I had this idea that I had to speak as quickly as possible to sound fluent. I wanted to impress people, and I thought speed was the way to do that. But the more I tried to speak fast, the more mistakes I made. I started stumbling over my words, and the meaning I was trying to convey was lost. It wasn't until I slowed down and focused on speaking clearly that I started to see real progress. The importance of clarity over speed. Let me tell you something. Clarity is the foundation of good communication. Whether you're speaking with a friend, a colleague, or a teacher, if the person you're talking to doesn't understand you, then all the words you've said are meaningless. It doesn't matter how fast you speak. What matters is that you can express your thoughts in a way that others can comprehend. Here's a simple exercise that helped me understand this. Try speaking slowly and clearly in English, focusing on pronunciation, intonation, and pauses. Pay attention to how your words sound. Now, try to speak the same thing as quickly as you can. You'll notice that when you rush, your words may become jumbled, or your pronunciation might get sloppy. It's a common issue that happens when we prioritize speed over clarity. By speaking clearly, you are allowing your listener the opportunity to understand you more easily. This is especially important in English because it has a wide range of sounds, some of which can be tricky to pronounce. When you speak too quickly, you might skip sounds or blend words together, which can make it hard for others to follow what you're saying. Let's look at an example. If you say the sentence, "I would like a cup of coffee," and you rush through it, it could sound like this. "I'd like a cup of coffee." This is very hard to understand, right? But if you slow down and speak clearly, saying each word distinctly, "I would like a cup of coffee," it becomes much easier to follow. And this is how you should approach speaking English. The power of pauses. One of the most important techniques in speaking clearly is the pause. When you speak too quickly, you don't give yourself time to think, and you don't give your listener time to process what you're saying. But when you speak slowly and intentionally, you can use pauses to emphasize important points, give your listener time to catch up, and give yourself time to think about what you want to say next. I remember when I first started practicing speaking, clearly I was nervous that pausing would make me sound unconfident or like I didn't know what I was talking about. But the truth is, pauses actually make you sound more confident. They give you a moment to collect your thoughts and ensure that you're saying exactly what you mean. Pausing also makes your speech sound more natural and calm. Think about how you speak in your native language. When you have a conversation, you naturally pause between sentences, take breaths, and allow the other person to respond. This is a normal part of communication. In English, the same principle applies. Pausing doesn't make you sound slow or less fluent. It makes you sound clear, deliberate, and thoughtful. And this is the essence of good communication. How slowing down improves your fluency? You might be thinking, but won't speaking more slowly make me sound less fluent? Here's the thing. Slowing down is actually a technique to help you sound more fluent in the long run. It allows you to focus on the quality of your speech rather than the speed. When you slow down, you give yourself the space to be more accurate, to pronounce words correctly, and to form better sentences. When I first started learning English, I was so focused on speaking fast that I would forget the grammar rules and make mistakes in my sentence structure. But when I slowed down, I gave myself the time to think through my words and make sure I was speaking correctly. The more I practiced speaking clearly, the more confident I became, and over time, my fluency improved. Here's a helpful tip. Focus on your enunciation. Speak each word clearly and take your time. You might feel like you're speaking slowly at first, but that's okay. The more you practice this, the more natural it will feel. And soon enough, you'll find that speaking clearly becomes second nature, and you won't have to think as much about how fast or slow you're speaking. Real-life application of speaking clearly. When you're in a conversation, whether with a teacher, a friend, or a colleague, the goal is to communicate effectively. Speaking quickly might get your message across, but it can also create confusion or misunderstanding. Speaking clearly, on the other hand, ensures that your message is understood the first time. It's not just about the speed of your words. It's about how well you connect with the listener. This applies in all areas of life. Whether you're giving a presentation, having a job interview, or just having a casual conversation. If you can speak clearly, you'll not only be more easily understood, but you'll also come across as more confident, professional, and approachable. I want you to try something today. When you speak in English, pay attention to your speed. Take a deep breath, slow down, and focus on speaking each word clearly. Notice how it feels, and notice how the people you're speaking with respond. I bet you'll see that they understand you better, and you'll feel more confident in your ability to communicate. Final thoughts. Slowing down is the key. To wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. Fluency doesn't come from speaking fast. It comes from speaking clearly and confidently. The next time you're practicing your English, focus on clarity over speed. Don't rush through your sentences. Take your time, use pauses to emphasize your points, and focus on speaking with purpose. Remember, the goal is not to speak as fast as possible. The goal is to be understood, to express yourself clearly, and to build confidence with every conversation. Fluency is a process, and speaking clearly is one of the most important steps you can take toward becoming a fluent, confident English speaker. So take a deep breath, slow down, and enjoy the journey. Part 6. Listening and repetition as key to fluency. When it comes to learning any language, we often focus on speaking, thinking that speaking is the most important aspect of fluency. But I want to tell you that listening is just as crucial, if not more so, in the process of becoming fluent in English. In fact, listening and repetition are two of the most powerful tools you can use to unlock fluency. The power of listening. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you really listened to English? I mean, really listened, not just hearing. Words in the background, but actively paying attention to how people speak, the rhythm of the language, the pronunciation, and the way sentences are structured. When I was learning English, I spent hours listening to English every day. I would listen to podcasts, watch movies, and listen to music. I made it a habit to immerse myself in the language. And while I didn't understand everything at first, I began to notice something amazing. My brain started to pick up on patterns in the language, even when I didn't know the exact meaning of every word. Listening, in its most natural form, is how we all learn our first language. Think about a baby. Before they speak, they first listen. They listen to the sounds around them, the tones in people's voices, the rhythm of words. They hear this day after day, and after a while, they start to imitate it. Slowly, they begin to understand the meanings of words and phrases, and eventually, they speak. This process is exactly the same when you're learning English. Listening to English helps you internalize the rhythm, pronunciation, and intonation of the language. You start to understand how sentences are constructed and how native speakers use expressions in different contexts. This deepens your connection to the language and makes it easier for you to speak naturally and confidently. Listening to understand the whole picture. Here's an important point. Listening helps you understand the bigger picture. You might be able to memorize individual words, but if you don't understand how those words fit together in a sentence, you'll have a hard time communicating effectively. Listening helps you see how native speakers connect words, phrases, and ideas together in real-life conversations. For example, when you listen to a podcast or watch a movie in English, pay close attention to how the speaker connects their thoughts. Notice how they pause, how they use different tones for emphasis, and how they change the speed of their speech depending on what they're saying. These are all clues about how to structure your own sentences when you speak. At first, it might seem overwhelming because there's so much information coming at you at once, but don't worry. Over time, as you keep listening, your brain will begin to recognize these patterns, and soon it will feel more natural to follow along with conversations, even if you don't understand every word. The role of repetition in fluency. Now, let's talk about repetition, an often overlooked but incredibly powerful tool for fluency. I can't stress enough how important it is to hear the same things over and over again. Repetition helps your brain internalize the language so that when it's your turn to speak, you can recall the words and structures more easily. When I was learning English, I didn't just listen to a piece of content once. I listened to the same podcast episode or watched the same movie multiple times. Each time I would catch new words and phrases that I hadn't noticed before. This repetition helped me remember vocabulary and improve my understanding of how sentences were formed. But repetition doesn't just mean hearing things over and over. It also means saying them out loud. Here's how I recommend you use repetition in your own language practice. When you hear a sentence or a phrase that you like or that you find useful, repeat it out loud. Try to mimic the way the speaker says it. Their tone, their pauses, the emphasis they place on certain words. By doing this, you're training your brain and your mouth to speak English more naturally. You're also improving your pronunciation and your fluency. How listening and repetition reinforce each other. Listening and repetition work hand in hand. When you listen to something multiple times, you start to absorb the sounds and rhythms of the language. Then, by repeating what you hear, you reinforce those patterns in your own speech. It's like playing a musical instrument. When you practice a song over and over, you start to play it more smoothly and naturally. The same thing happens when you practice speaking by repeating phrases you've heard. Here's a practical exercise you can do. Find a short audio clip or a part of a movie or TV show in English that you enjoy. Listen to it several times and then try to repeat exactly what you hear. Don't worry about understanding every single word right away. Focus on mimicking the sounds, rhythm, and flow of the speech. This is a great way to train your ear and mouth to speak more naturally. I did this all the time when I was learning. I would listen to an English song or podcast and then try to sing along or repeat the phrases. At first, I couldn't keep up, but with time, I started to recognize words and phrases, and eventually, I could speak along with the audio almost perfectly. Making listening and repetition part of your daily routine. If you really want to improve your fluency, make listening and repetition a daily part of your language routine. Set aside time each day to listen to English content, whether it's a podcast, a TV show, or even a YouTube video. And don't just listen passively. Make an active effort to repeat what you hear, to understand the meaning behind the words, and to connect the vocabulary with real-life usage. For instance, try this exercise. Choose a podcast or video that is interesting to you. It should be something you enjoy because you'll be listening to it several times. Listen to the content once without pausing. Just let the language wash over you. Try to understand the general meaning, even if you don't catch every word. Listen again and pause the audio after each sentence. Repeat what you just heard, imitating the speaker's tone, rhythm, and pronunciation as closely as possible. Listen a third time, and this time, try to speak along with the speaker without pausing. See if you can keep up and say it just like they do. Do this every day, and you'll see a dramatic improvement in your fluency over time. The more you listen, the more natural your speech will become. Why listening and repetition matter more than you might think, but I already know a lot of vocabulary and grammar. Why do I need to focus so much on listening and repetition? Here's why. Language isn't just about knowing words and rules. It's about being able to use those words and rules in real-life situations. And the best way to prepare for those situations is by listening to how language is used naturally. When you listen, you hear how native speakers navigate conversations, how they use expressions, idioms, and slang. You learn the cultural nuances, the rhythm of the language, and the flow of natural conversation. Repetition helps you own that language, so when it's time to speak, you can use those words, phrases, and structures effortlessly. By practicing listening and repetition consistently, you are building the foundation for becoming a fluent speaker. You are not just memorizing words. You are learning to think in English, to understand it, and to speak it naturally. Final thoughts. Make listening and repetition your superpower. To wrap up, if you want to become fluent in English, remember this: listening and repetition are not optional. They are the keys that unlock the door to fluency. Every time you listen and repeat, you are strengthening your connection to the language and making it a natural part of your life. So go ahead and start incorporating listening and repetition into your daily routine. The more you do it, the more confident and fluent you'll become. Part 7. Making mistakes and building confidence. Let's talk about something that I know many of you are afraid of: making mistakes. I completely understand that fear because I've been there. I remember when I first started learning English, I was terrified of making mistakes. Every time I said something wrong, I would feel embarrassed, like I was failing. I thought that every mistake was a sign that I wasn't good enough, that I was just wasting my time. But here's the truth. I want you to understand right now. Mistakes are not your enemy. In fact, they are your greatest ally on the road to fluency. Why? We fear mistakes. When we're learning something new, especially a language, it's natural to want to get everything right. We want to speak perfectly, sound intelligent, and impress others. But here's the thing. The more we focus on perfection, the more afraid we become of making mistakes. And that fear can actually hold us back. Instead of pushing ourselves forward, we start to avoid speaking, avoid practicing, and avoid the very thing that will help us get better: mistakes. Mistakes, however, are an essential part of the learning process. Think about it. When you were a child learning to walk, did you give up the first time you fell? Of course not. You got back up, tried again, and with each fall, you learned something new. The same thing applies when you're learning a language. Every mistake you make is a step toward improvement, embracing mistakes as a path to learning. Now, let me give you a little secret. The most successful language learners are not the ones who never make mistakes. No. They are the ones who embrace their mistakes, learn from them, and use them as stepping stones to greater fluency. Mistakes teach us about the areas we need to improve on, and they give us valuable feedback on how to do better next time. When I was learning English, I made tons of mistakes. I mispronounced words, used the wrong grammar, and sometimes even said things that didn't make sense. But the more I made mistakes, the more I started to realize that each mistake was a lesson. For example, I remember once saying, "I'm interesting," instead of "I'm interested." I felt embarrassed when I realized my mistake. But guess what? I never made that mistake again. And over time, I learned to embrace those little errors as part of my growth. How mistakes build confidence. Here's something that might surprise you. The more you make mistakes, the more confident you will become. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but let me explain. When we make a mistake and then correct ourselves, we are actually building our knowledge and reinforcing our learning. It's like lifting weights at the gym. When you challenge yourself with heavier weights, your muscles get stronger. Similarly, when you make a mistake and learn from it, your language skills become stronger. Each time you make a mistake and then fix it, you are proving to yourself that you can handle it, and that builds confidence. Think about this. Confidence doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from knowing that you can handle challenges, that you can make mistakes and still keep going. Over time, as you continue to practice and make mistakes, you'll start to notice something amazing. You'll start to feel more comfortable speaking, even if you're not perfect. And that comfort is the key to confidence. You'll no longer worry about saying the wrong thing or messing up, because you'll know that every mistake is just another step on the path to becoming a fluent speaker. Creating a safe space for mistakes. So, how do we start creating a mindset where we embrace mistakes rather than fear them? One of the best ways is to create a safe environment for yourself to make mistakes. This means finding places where you feel comfortable speaking without judgment. Whether it's with a language exchange partner, a supportive teacher, or even talking to yourself in front of a mirror. I remember when I was learning, I practiced speaking English in front of the mirror every day. I would talk about my day, ask myself questions, and respond, all in English. I didn't care if I made mistakes because I knew the mirror wasn't going to judge me. I created a safe space where I could practice, make mistakes, and learn without feeling embarrassed. You can do the same. Whether you're practicing with a friend or speaking aloud to yourself, make mistakes and learn from them without any fear. The more you practice in a safe environment, the more you'll feel ready to take those risks in real conversations. The power of positive self-talk. One of the biggest things that can hold us back from making mistakes is our inner critic. The voice inside our head that tells us, "You shouldn't have said that. That was embarrassing." Or, "You'll never get it right." This voice can be extremely damaging to our confidence. But here's the secret. You have the power to change that voice. Instead of letting your inner critic drag you down, start practicing positive self-talk. Every time you make a mistake, instead of saying, "I'm so stupid," or "I'll never get it right," say something like, "That's okay. I learned something new," or "I'm one step closer to being fluent." Positive self-talk can change your entire mindset, and it will help you build the confidence to keep going, no matter how many mistakes you make. I personally used positive self-talk throughout my journey. Every time I messed up, I told myself, "That's a part of the process, and I'm improving every day." Over time, this mindset shift made a huge difference in my confidence and my ability to keep pushing forward. Learning from others' mistakes. Another great way to build confidence is to learn from others' mistakes. You're not alone in this journey, and many people have gone through the same struggles. I can't tell you how many times I've learned from watching others. Whether it was a classmate who made a mistake and then corrected themselves, or a famous speaker who stumbled over a word but kept going, watching others handle their mistakes with grace gave me the confidence to do the same. I remember listening to a TED Talk by a famous speaker who admitted that he had made huge mistakes early on in his career. He was even nervous before speaking in front of a large audience, just like many of us are when speaking in a new language. But what struck me the most was how he didn't let those mistakes stop him. Instead, he used them as opportunities to grow, just like I was learning to do with my own English mistakes. That was a big turning point for me. It reminded me that everyone makes mistakes, and that's completely okay. Take action and start speaking. So, here's what I want you to do. Don't wait for the perfect moment to start speaking. Start now. Speak with confidence, even if you're afraid of making mistakes. The more you practice, the better you'll get. Remember, confidence comes from action, not from waiting for perfection. Start with small conversations. Talk to yourself in the mirror. Speak to a friend, even if you're nervous. And each time you make a mistake, celebrate it. You've learned something new, and that's a huge win. Mistakes are part of the process. They are your stepping stones to fluency. And every time you make a mistake and get back up, you're one step closer to your goal. Part 8. Thinking in English and Staying Focused. When you start learning English, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking in your native language first and then translating it into English. But here's the thing. Thinking in English is one of the most powerful steps you can take to becoming fluent. In this section, we're going to talk about how thinking in English can dramatically improve your fluency and how you can stay focused while doing it. Why thinking in English is so important. If you've ever translated from your native language to English in your head while speaking, you know how it slows you down. Instead of focusing on the conversation or the message you're trying to communicate, you're stuck in a loop of translation. This process makes you hesitate, and sometimes you even forget the words you need. Thinking in English, on the other hand, allows you to speak more naturally and without hesitation. It makes English feel like your second nature, rather than a foreign language. When I was learning English, I faced this exact problem. I would try to form a sentence, but I would think first in my native language, and then try to translate it into English. I'd often get stuck in the middle of the sentence, or worse, I would say something that didn't quite make sense. It was frustrating, and I felt like I wasn't making much progress. But then one day, I decided to make a change. I made a conscious effort to stop translating and instead start thinking directly in English. And you know what? That made all the difference. How thinking in English improves fluency. When you think in English, you don't have to go through the time-consuming step of translation. You get straight to the point. You're no longer mentally translating words and phrases. You're using them naturally, just like a native speaker would. This not only makes your speaking faster and more fluent, but it also makes your sentences more accurate. You'll start using grammar and vocabulary more instinctively, instead of pausing to think about how to form each sentence. Thinking in English also helps you absorb the language in a more organic way. Think about how you learned your native language. Did you spend years memorizing grammar rules and vocabulary? No, you learned by being surrounded by the language, by hearing it all the time and slowly absorbing it. The more you think in English, the more you start internalizing the language, so it becomes second nature, shifting from translation to thinking in English. So, how do you make the shift from translating in your head to thinking directly in English? It's not something that happens overnight, but with practice, you'll get there. Here are a few tips that helped me make that change. Start small at first. You don't need to completely stop thinking in your native language. Start with small steps. For example, try thinking in English when you're doing simple tasks like ordering food, making a shopping list, or planning your day. When you're doing these activities, try to visualize the words in English, even if you're not speaking out loud. This is a way to start familiarizing yourself with thinking directly in the language. Use English in everyday situations. Another strategy that really helped me was to immerse myself in English in as many everyday situations as possible. I would think about my day in English, what I was going to do, where I was going, what I needed to buy. I'd even talk to myself in English as I went about my day. This helped me practice thinking without translating and start using English naturally. For instance, instead of thinking, I need to go to the store to buy bread, I would think, I'm going to the store to buy bread. Over time, I started speaking in English without needing to translate each word in my head. 3. Focus on simple sentences. At first, don't worry too much about forming complex sentences. Instead, focus on keeping things simple. Use short, clear sentences to describe what you're doing or thinking. For example, if you're walking down the street, you can say to yourself in English, I'm walking to the store, or I'm looking at the clouds. The goal is to make thinking in English feel natural, and simple sentences are a great way to start. Engage with English. Content. Surround yourself with English as much as possible. Listen to English podcasts, watch English TV shows or YouTube videos, and read books in English. As you listen to or read content, try to think about the meaning without translating. For example, when you watch a video or listen to a podcast, instead of translating each word into your native language, focus on understanding the general idea. As you expose yourself to more English, you'll begin to process the language faster without needing to translate. Talk to yourself in English. It may feel a little strange at first, but I recommend talking to yourself in English. Whether you're at home, on a walk, or commuting, try to describe what you're doing, what you're thinking, or even just talk about your day. When I first started doing this, it felt awkward, but over time, it became easier, and I began thinking in English more and more naturally. You're practicing without any pressure, and it's a safe way to get more comfortable with the language. Staying focused. The key to thinking in English. Thinking in English requires a certain level of focus. This means that you have to actively pay attention to how you're thinking and make a conscious effort to stay in the language. Staying focused in English can be difficult at times, especially when you're tired or distracted. But here's a tip. When you feel your thoughts slipping back into your native language, try to gently guide yourself back into English. One thing that helped me stay focused was setting small, achievable goals for myself. For example, I would Challenge myself to think in English for 10 minutes a day, then 15 minutes, then 30 minutes. Over time, it became easier to stay in English for longer periods of time, and I felt more confident with my thinking skills in the language. The benefits of thinking in English. There are several amazing benefits to thinking in English. Increased fluency. When you think in English, you start to process information faster, which helps you speak and respond more quickly in conversations. More natural speech. Thinking in English allows you to use vocabulary and grammar more naturally, just like a native speaker. Better listening skills. As you start thinking in English, you also improve your ability to listen and understand the language at a faster pace, because you're actively processing everything in English. Improved confidence. When you think in English, you feel more comfortable and confident using the language, which helps you speak without hesitation. Overcoming challenges with focused thinking. Now I know that thinking in English isn't always easy. There will be times when you get distracted, when you find yourself translating again, or when you simply don't know how to express something. And that's okay. The important thing is to keep practicing and stay focused on your goal. It's normal to slip back into translation, but don't let it discourage you. Every time you refocus and get back into thinking in English, you're improving. A great way to overcome challenges is to stay patient with yourself. Remember, fluency doesn't come overnight. But with consistent practice, your brain will start to make the shift. The more you practice thinking in English, the easier it will become. Final thoughts. In conclusion, thinking in English is a powerful tool that will help you reach fluency faster and more naturally. It will make speaking, listening, and even writing easier. So, start small, stay consistent, and challenge yourself to think in English throughout the day. Stay focused on your goal and trust the process. Remember, fluency is not just about speaking the language, it's about living it. When you think in English, you start to live in English, and that's when your fluency truly begins to shine. Part 9. Expanding your practice methods. One of the most exciting things about learning a language is that there is no single right way to practice. There are endless ways to engage with the language, and the more diverse your methods, the more dynamic and effective your learning becomes. In this section, we're going to explore a variety of practice methods that you can incorporate into your routine to help you expand your skills and accelerate your progress toward fluency. The power of varied practice. The key to mastering any skill is repetition, but repetition doesn't always have to look the same. If you practice the same thing in the same way every day, it can become monotonous, and you might even lose interest. That's why it's so important to expand your practice methods and keep things fresh. When I was learning English, I quickly realized that if I only focused on one aspect of the language, whether it was grammar, speaking, or listening, I was missing out on the bigger picture. English, like any language, is a blend of different skills: speaking, listening, reading, writing, and even thinking in the language. By expanding the way I practiced, I was able to build a stronger foundation and improve my overall fluency. Integrating language into your daily life. The most natural and effective way to practice English is to integrate it into your everyday life. This isn't about setting aside hours to study. It's about finding opportunities to use the language throughout the day. Every moment is a chance to practice. Start by changing the language on your devices. Set your phone, computer, or social media apps to English. This simple change can help you become more familiar with vocabulary, expressions, and even cultural references. Engage in your daily routine in English. Think in English while you go about your day. If you're cooking, for example, say things like, "I'm cutting the vegetables," or "I need to boil the water." When you're running errands, try to describe what you're doing in English, or even explain it to yourself. Language exchange and conversation partners. One of the best ways to improve your speaking skills is by conversing with others. And I'm not talking about just any conversation. I'm talking about language exchange partners. These are people who are fluent in English or are also learning, and you exchange language skills. You speak in English, and they speak in your native language, helping each other practice. When I first started, I found a language exchange partner who was learning my native language. We'd schedule regular chats over Skype or meet in person. Sometimes we'd spend 30 minutes speaking in English and then switch to my native language for the next 30 minutes. Not only did this help improve my speaking skills, but it also allowed me to experience real-life conversations, something you can't get from textbooks. A few ways to find conversation partners. Use apps like Tandem, HelloTalk, or Speaky to find people who are interested in learning your language and can help you with English. Join online communities or forums where English speakers gather to share experiences and tips. Active listening practice. If you've been following along, you'd already know the power of listening. But let's go deeper into active listening. This means listening intentionally and focusing on understanding both the content and the delivery of the language. How to practice active listening. Listen to podcasts. Pick a podcast in English that interests you and listen to it regularly. Focus on how the host speaks, the intonation, and the flow of the conversation. Watch TV shows and movies. Choose shows that match your interests and turn on English subtitles, preferably ones that match the speech exactly, not just closed captions. This will help you not only understand the context, but also recognize words you might have missed otherwise. Listen to songs. Songs are a great way to practice listening to different accents, rhythms, and slang. Try to learn the lyrics and sing along. This helps with pronunciation and fluency. 4. Reading and expanding your vocabulary. Reading is a fantastic way to expand your vocabulary and become familiar with different sentence structures. When you read in English, you're exposed to new words and phrases, and you get a sense of how the language flows. Different types of reading material. Books. Start with books that match your level and gradually move on to more challenging content. Fiction is often more casual and can teach you a lot of conversational language, while nonfiction might introduce you to more formal vocabulary. Articles and blogs. These are great because they often use contemporary language, and you can find topics that interest you. Whether it's about science, lifestyle, business, or technology, you'll get exposed to a wide range of vocabulary and styles of writing. Short stories. These are perfect for busy days because they don't take long to read, and they provide context to new words, helping you understand them better. Don't just passively read, make it active. When you come across a new word, don't just move on. Look it up, write it down, and try to use it in a sentence. You can even create flashcards to help you remember these new words. Writing to solidify your knowledge. Writing is an often overlooked practice, but it's an essential part of becoming fluent. Writing forces you to pay attention to grammar, sentence structure, and word choice. It also helps you practice organizing your thoughts in English. How to practice writing. Journaling. Start by writing in English every day. You don't need to write a novel. Even writing about your daily experiences or thoughts can help. For example, today I learned how to use the word fascinating. I saw it in a documentary about space, and it made me think about the universe. Email correspondence. Practice writing emails in English, whether it's with friends, teachers, or language exchange partners. This is a real-world application of your language skills. Creative writing. Try writing short stories, poems, or even social media posts in English. This can be a fun way to express yourself and experiment with new vocabulary. Using flashcards and spaced repetition. Flashcards are an old school, yet incredibly effective method for vocabulary building. The key to making flashcards work, however, is using a method called spaced repetition. This technique involves reviewing your flashcards at increasing intervals to help reinforce your memory. There are several apps available that can help with this. Anki, a popular app that uses spaced repetition to help you learn and memorize vocabulary. Quizlet, another great tool for creating digital flashcards and reviewing them regularly. You can create flashcards for words, phrases, or even sentence structures that you find difficult. Over time, you'll begin to recall words faster and with more accuracy. Immersing yourself in the language. Another fantastic way to expand your practice methods is to immerse yourself in the language as much as possible. You don't have to travel to an English-speaking country to immerse yourself in English. Here are a few ways to create your own immersion environment. Engage with English media. Watch movies, TV shows, YouTube videos, and even the news in English. Set aside time each day to watch or listen to something in English. Follow social media accounts in English. Follow influencers, educators, and news outlets that use English. This will help you stay up to date with the language and its use in current contexts. Join communities. Participate in online forums, Discord groups, or social media groups that are in English. This exposes you to conversational English and current slang. Setting challenges and goals. One of the best ways to stay motivated and expand your practice methods is to set specific challenges and goals. Without goals, it's easy to lose focus and feel like you're not making progress. How to set your goals. Short-term goals. These could be things like learn 10 new words a day, write 1 journal entry a week, or speak with a language exchange partner 3 times this month. Long-term goals. These could involve reading a book in English, watching a movie without subtitles, or having a 30-minute conversation in English without hesitating. Remember, setting clear goals helps you stay on track and measure your progress. It also gives you something to celebrate when you hit your milestones. Final thoughts. In summary, there are countless ways to expand your practice methods and improve your fluency. The key is to find what works for you and make it part of your daily routine. Don't be afraid to experiment with different techniques and mix things up. The more diverse your practice, the more dynamic your learning will be, and the faster you'll become fluent. The most important thing is to stay consistent and stay engaged. Make English a part of your everyday life, and the progress will follow. Part 10. Conclusion and motivation to keep going. As we wrap up this journey, I want to take a moment to reflect on everything we've discussed. Learning English, or any language for that matter, is a marathon, not a sprint. There will be times when it feels like you're making rapid progress, and there will be times when you feel stuck, unsure of how to move forward. But I want to remind you, every step you take, no matter how small, is a step closer to fluency. If you're watching this video, then you've already taken the most important step. You've decided to learn, to improve, and to put in the effort. That decision is huge. It shows that you're committed to your growth, and that's something you should be proud of. But let me be honest with you. The road to fluency isn't always going to be easy. It's going to take time, patience, and a lot of hard work. You'll encounter obstacles, you'll make mistakes, and there will be moments when you'll question your progress. But let me share with you something that's really important to remember. All of that is part of the process. Embrace the journey, not just the destination. When we think about fluency, it's easy to imagine the end goal. Speaking effortlessly, understanding everything, and confidently communicating with others. And that's a great goal to have. But what I want to encourage you to do is to embrace the journey, not just the destination. Fluency isn't something that happens overnight. It's a process of learning, practicing, and growing every single day. The key to success is consistency, persistence, and maintaining a positive mindset. Each time you practice, even if it's just for 10 minutes, you're making progress. Even if you make a mistake, you're learning something new. Every word you learn, every sentence you speak, every conversation you have brings you closer to your goal. Reflecting on your progress. One thing that I found incredibly helpful when I was learning English was to regularly reflect on my progress. Sometimes we get so caught up in the "I still don't know enough" mindset that we forget how far we've come. So I want you to stop for a moment and think about where you started. Think about the very first time you tried to speak English. How far have you come since then? Maybe you didn't know how to introduce yourself in English. Maybe you struggled to understand basic phrases or didn't know how to form sentences. But now you can likely say a lot more. Maybe you can read articles in English, listen to podcasts without too much difficulty, or have simple conversations with others. It's easy to forget how much progress you've made because fluency is a long-term goal. But trust me, you are making progress, and every small step counts. It's like planting a seed. At first, it looks like nothing is happening, but with time and care, it starts to grow. Your fluency is like that seed. It's growing each day, even if you can't see it yet. Celebrate your wins. As you continue on your learning journey, I want you to celebrate your wins, no matter how small they seem. Maybe you've mastered a new grammar rule. Maybe you understood a conversation without asking for clarification. Maybe you spoke for the first time without translating in your head. These are wins, and they are proof that you're moving forward. Celebrating your progress, even the little victories, will help keep you motivated. It's easy to get discouraged when you're focused on what you haven't achieved yet. But take a moment to appreciate everything you've accomplished so far. You're on the right path. The power of persistence. One of the most important qualities you need to develop as a language learner is persistence. There will be moments when you feel like giving up. You'll hit plateaus, or you might feel frustrated because you're not improving as quickly as you want to. But it's persistence that will get you through those tough times. Every successful language learner has faced challenges. It's a normal part of the process. But they didn't give up. They kept going. And that's what you have to do too. Keep going. Even if it's just a little bit every day, keep practicing. Keep making mistakes. Keep learning. Because that's how fluency is built. When I was learning English, there were days when I felt like I was taking one step forward and two steps back. But I never stopped. I knew that every bit of effort was worth it. The moments when I struggled were the moments when I grew the most. And eventually, all those small efforts added up to real fluency. The same will happen for you. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are often seen as something to avoid, but in reality, mistakes are your teachers. They're part of the process. When you make a mistake, it means you're pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. You're taking risks, and that's exactly what you need to do to grow. I know it can be uncomfortable at times. It can feel embarrassing to make a mistake, especially when you're speaking in front of others. But the more you embrace your mistakes, the more you'll learn from them. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. In fact, welcome them. Because each mistake brings you closer to fluency. Stay motivated by your why. Now let me ask you, why do you want to become fluent in English? This is an important question. Is it to advance your career? Is it to travel the world? Is it to communicate with people from different cultures? Your reason, your why, will keep you motivated during the difficult times. When I was learning English, my why was to be able to communicate with people from around the world. I wanted to travel, make new friends, and experience the world in a new way. Whenever I felt stuck or frustrated, I would remind myself of that reason. It helped me push through the tough days and stay motivated. So take a moment to think about your why. Let that reason drive you forward, even when the journey feels long or challenging. Final words of encouragement. Fluency in English is not an overnight achievement, but it is an achievable one. Every day you put in the effort, every word you learn, every sentence you speak is a step toward your goal. And remember, you are capable of reaching that goal. So, keep going. Keep pushing forward. Stay consistent. Stay positive. And remember that every mistake is just part of your growth. Embrace the process. And most importantly, enjoy it. Fluency is a journey, and you're doing amazing. You've got this. Great work today. Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.